Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, oh my God. We're recording this at 11:44 a.m. Sunday morning, and Lane Kiffin to LSU. That is expected to be official very soon here. But just before we started recording, Alex Golesh to Auburn, Jon Sumrall to Florida, Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas. Lane Kiffin feels like the domino that was supposed to make all of these jobs fall, and I guess he did. But bang, 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 SEC vacancies filled all over the place. Now there's a vacancy at Ole Miss. My head is spinning. Oh, by the way, rivalry week. We have an SEC championship. Georgia and Alabama are going to play yet again. This is officially the Overstimulation podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. You know, we could all be thankful that we're not Marty Smith on this day. I think that
Good
dude,
Lord.
we got to give that
Lad
guy
of
a
the week.
timeout. He better get an NIL deal after this, okay? Because that dude has been doing the Lord's work. They just kept cutting to him after every quarter of every game, just like, and Marty, how you doing? He's got a pair of binoculars. He's like, I see Lane's silhouette here. No, I mean, it's been. This is why we love this sport. This is why this is my favorite sport in this world. Is that other leagues can try this. With the headlines, some of the stuff the NBA has done, where it's always the transaction. But right now, this feels like the most exciting time that I've seen in this sport, with all the realignment stuff, the coaches, and it's kingdom building. After a year where no coaches were fired, and we hit on it over and over again, the face of the entire conference has shifted in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so now we're going to have 5 SEC teams at least with new coaches. We're recording this before any decision has been made on Mark Stoops, so maybe we'll get that mid-pod. I don't know.
Mark Stoops will be coaching until the sun death of the earth. That's one thing. He did the "you got to drag me out of here" quote last night. Good for him. He's the only one who has job security.
Yeah, my gosh. Okay, we have a million things to get to. Before we get to everything, quick word from our friends at Dabble, who you guys know Dabble has been a partner of ours for a while now. They are the newest and one of the best apps in the DFS space. They've wasted no time making a name for themselves. The social function is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports making picks, including college football, which, oh, by the way, still doing that through the bowl season, through college football playoff, conference championship, all that. We've got NFL going on right now. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Well, let's start with the Lane saga, because your Bayou Bengals appear to have landed Lane Kiffin after just a bananas sequence of events where we had this meeting with Ole Miss athletic director Keith Carter that was supposed to be happening at 4:00 yesterday, and then it turns into all these LSU officials expect that he is going to LSU, and then they're going to have a team meeting at 10 a.m. and then Kiffin moves that back, and apparently it's all because he wants to coach in the playoff. Which, by the way, Ole Miss wins the Egg Bowl. We're not really going to talk about the Egg Bowl today. I'll be honest. Trinidad Chambliss got his jersey stolen. He balled out. Ole Miss played really well.
What if I told you that Trinidad Chambliss' jersey would get stolen at 3 a.m. and we wouldn't care like a day later?
We wouldn't care. Yeah, it would be like the 50th most important thing that happened in the SEC this weekend. But Lane is set to go to LSU. And for those of us who have been saying, like, I think he's going back to Ole Miss, seeing this play out in a very 2009 Lane Kiffin fashion kind of has me feeling like this guy is still the same person that he's always been, isn't he?
Yes, it really is. And we talked about it last time I was on air with you, which was that we both thought after all this smoke, he would end up doing a little bit of the Jimmy Sexton special. I feel like we almost owe him an apology for the amount of chaos that one man could create. Like, we all were like, oh, we'll see. Like, most of the cool heads over the course of the last couple of weeks were saying, this is all a stunt. He just wants to feel loved. What is he missing at Ole Miss? And the answer is the most chaotic possible, result, which is this long meeting yesterday with Carter, the athletic director, that just kept going on. And we find out, and let me just take a step back here. This is where covering the NBA, I feel like, really helps me because of the stuff with CAA. Go ahead.
This is insane to me, though,
Mm-hmm.
that they had this conversation draw out as long as they have. And Lane didn't even know going into this. Like, this has been a very deliberate process, it feels like, with the courting of Lane Kiffin and Florida falling out of the sweepstakes.
And the Plains,
and and the Plains, and his family's going to Baton Rouge and all this stuff. The thing that I cannot for the life of me figure out is how Lane approached this, assuming that he was going to be coaching in the college football playoff. And so for those who are saying, like Kirk Herbstreit, You got to let him coach in the playoff. You got to let him finish what he built. No way, man. No freaking way. This is not Jon Sumrall going from Tulane to Florida. He's gonna be allowed to coach in the conference championship through the college football playoff. This is a rival. This is a rival. And I have no problem whatsoever with Keith Carter putting his foot down and saying, yeah, I'm not going to let you just stay here and coach. If you're gone, you're gone. And you're leaving the only playoff team that you have ever been the head coach of. And that's the reality that's the sacrifice that you are telling us that you're willing to make.
Yeah, it's insane. I'm glad that you said it that way. I haven't even really checked up on you because so much has been going on. And it's like, like I said, let me reset. I feel like covering the NBA has prepared me for this in such a unique way because it all goes back to CAA, right? Leon Rose was a very high-ranking executive with CAA, and then got the president of basketball operations job with the Knicks, and suddenly everything turned around for the Knicks because all the CAA guys started hanging around, talent started accruing there, and so you have a situation where it feels like people that were representing CAA were kind of floating this narrative out there, like, wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if Lane Kiffin was able to finish this season out.
Kirk Herbstreit going on game day
Yep.
and saying this is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want to call anybody out like by name and stuff like that because I don't know their backstory, but it feels like when we as just neutral parties, right, look at it and go, this doesn't make any type of sense. This guy is the best case scenario is going to be the offensive coordinator situation that he was in with Alabama, where he takes the FAU job, but he's already like he's not super prepared for Washington. Saban basically throws him out and says, "You're not prepared for this." That's the best case scenario of him, playing this out. And the worst case is he's sitting there poaching players. That's one thing that the FAU situation had no bearing on. You're not going to leave Alabama to go play at FAU, even if you're a third or fourth stringer, but you will leave Ole Miss to go with your current coaches, with Lane Kiffin to LSU. And so I think you're totally right. It would be insane. It would be asinine for Ole Miss to say, well, you brought us here and we're such a small market
We're so
brand.
Grateful.
Oh, we're so grateful, bro. Oh, we're so thank you, Lane Kiffin. Like I'm mad on behalf of Ole Miss because remember,
yes,
my background is covering the Orlando Magic, covering the New Orleans Pelicans, these small market teams that get told, well, you got to just be fine when the Lakers take your players. No, you don't. You have a right to be mad, and you have a right to say, we're Ole Miss. We built all this for you, and you need to get the bleep out if you don't like it here.
They basically changed state law for Lane Kiffin with these contracts,
Yes,
Will.
they did.
They basically said, we'll work it out. We'll figure that stuff out on the back end, the 4-year deals and all this that state employees in Mississippi need. Yeah, we'll figure out a way to make sure that you're taken care of. They've given him the budget that he could have hoped for. And look, I'm on record saying I think leaving a situation that obviously was really great, I think in the long run, I do think Kiffin will look back and regret it. Maybe I'll eat my words on that. That's fine. I totally understand why he took the LSU job. But for those who are saying, Ole Miss, you have no right to put your foot down, heck yes, they do. They absolutely do. And I have no problem. Like, what's the harm? What's the harm in Ole Miss putting its foot down? Because your head coach is saying he doesn't think he can win a national championship if he's leaving, right? Because otherwise he'd be staying. We talked about this with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. We talked about this with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Those coaches are staying at that job if they truly believe that they can win a national championship at those places. Lane Kiffin does not feel like he can win a national championship at Ole Miss. And if you're trying to figure out why has this been so messy, besides just the obvious, Lane Kiffin doesn't know how to have a clean breakup. This is essentially his 4th messy breakup that he's had, if you're including the Raiders thing with the Al Davis press conference that was so bizarre, obviously the Tennessee to USC thing, the tarmac situation. This is his 5th messy breakup, because if we're including the tarmac thing, we're including the Alabama to FAU thing, it's always messy with Lane. But if you're trying to figure out what's at the root of this, many lives of Lane Kiffin, he says, I care more about how people feel about me now compared to back then. I just acted however I wanted back then. I thought I was the king of this, that, and the other. And now he cares how people feel about him. And because he cares so much, this is why he's acting this way. Because he cares about his legacy at Ole Miss. He cares about being able to get that big-time job at LSU and wear that visor and feel like he's competing for a national championship every year. All of these things are at the root of why Lane Kiffin has gone about this in just the most Lane Kiffin way possible.
I think that to me is like, hey, I'm scared of fire, so I became a firefighter. right? Where it goes like, hey, I care about public perception, so I'm going to drag this out and do all that. And I got to be careful because apparently Lane Kiffin listened to a lot of podcasts we learned this weekend. So I don't know
Yeah,
if he's
shout out, man. My goodness
that
gracious.
for,
The Lane Kiffin, not a garden tool. Doesn't like to be called a garden tool,
yeah.
from what we learned.
And to be honest, the most I've respected Lane Kiffin throughout this whole process was him calling that out. Because no matter what, as my peer, you can't call me that. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, So shout out to him for handling business. But that being said, man, you know, I really, as I sit here, am not exactly sure. Again, like everybody knows it. I'm from Baton Rouge. I'm an LSU guy. I love that Lane Kiffin's my head coach. I think what it comes down to, in my opinion, again, not sourced up, this is just my opinion. I think it comes down to the fact that the recruiting situation is a lot more turnkey. And when I say turnkey, I think he will not have to spend time on it to be successful. I think that if you can retain a guy like Frank Wilson, there's rumors of bringing in Coach Ogeron again and let that system kind of do it. Because it's remember when we talked about previously about the LSU job and saying, oh, Coach O can win here. Anybody can win here. It might be a version of Lane Kiffin going, well, Brian Kelly was recruiting well there. He's playing 400 rounds of golf. So I will not be, I'm going to recruit no matter what. I'm going to get the players no matter what. I'm going to have to hit the portal no matter what. And that's the best answer I can give you because it does feel like a lot of what he needed was at Ole Miss.
Do you think Landry Kiffin put together a really good slideshow saying, come to LSU? You'll like it. I promise you.
That was an episode of like
ironic.
The Apprentice millennial or Gen Z style, that has been years in the making. She's probably on Canva now. She's probably got all kinds of visual aids. It's Today Sharks. I can't wait to hear this documentary.
Adobe Photoshop. Just going to leave that one there. Shout
There
out
you go.
Jordan Hudson.
Yeah, take those, Jordan Hudson. You can get an Adobe Photoshop and make some noise, all right?
Anyway, we will have a lot more Lane Kiffin to LSU talk on Wednesday as well. So this is not the only time that we're going to be talking about this. All these other jobs, whoever I have on the pod this week, I think the plan was to have Aaron Murray on. Maybe we're going to have two guests. Maybe Aaron will want to talk about all this stuff too, in addition to the SEC championship. But we have three other jobs that were just filled right before this recording. And we do need to talk about them before we get to these rivalry week games. Can we please start with Jon Sumrall to Florida? Because I thought this wasn't going to happen. You have pointed this out. Many have pointed it out. Florida had this failure of Billy Napier, and then what did it do? And went back and hired a group of five coach from the state of Louisiana to fill the vacancy left by Billy Napier, which is so ironic. But it almost feels like, and Florida botched this from a PR standpoint, like there's no doubt about it, the leaking of the Kiffin pursuit and all the figures. Like the figure that I had heard for Florida was that it was going to be 10 years, $150 million for Lane Kiffin. We can say that now that this is, but when I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago, 10 years, $150 million was what I heard the offer was. Now, how much of that?
It wasn't about money.
It wasn't about money because apparently this is 7 years, $90 million for LSU. I believe Ross Dellinger was the one that was reporting that. It might have been Pete Thamel, probably Pete Nakos, or maybe a hybrid Brett McMurphy of all four of those people, whatever the case. Jon Sumrall getting this job feels like Scott Strickland basically said, well, you know what? We're already going to lose the PR battle in this one. We ain't winning that press conference. Let's just go hire the guy that I think is going to be the best football coach. And for the first time since Will Muschamp, Florida hires a defensive-minded head coach. Just the second time, well, I guess third time we're including Ron Zook. Although Ron Zook felt more like an internal promotion. But nonetheless, Florida does the thing that it just did, but also the thing that it really doesn't do by hiring Jon Sumrall, and hiring another group of five coach is very familiar to Florida. But I think Jon Sumrall is a really good coach. It's just kind of weird that Florida ended up with him. Is it fair to think both things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a sunshine pumper guy. As you guys know, I've been critical of plenty of places, specifically University of Florida. I was out on Billy and said they probably shouldn't have brought him back, despite the win. So I'm not sitting here as a sunshine pumper. And I will say this too. I know it has to be a tough pill to swallow to say, okay, we're in this competition with LSU. It's us or them. It's us or them. And then we quote unquote settle for Sumrall. But guys, remember, Sumrall was waiting on you. At the end of the day, there are these other universities in Auburn, Arkansas, other jobs across the country that would have loved to have Jon Sumrall. And almost the second that it was made clear that Lane Kiffin was not, that they're not going forward with him, that the framework of that deal was in place. So I think that does say something positive about the University of Florida, that say what you will about Jon Sumrall, within the SEC, he was pretty clearly the second name.
Yes.
And Florida was able to get him very quickly because there could have very easily been a situation where, and again, I know Florida fans are not stoked about it. You should be. He's a winner. Okay, he did not do what Billy Napier did as far as rise too quickly and get above kind of his skis here. He's proven time and time again that he's a program builder, but
Two different schools doing it at Troy and Tulane
Mhm.
helps.
Exactly, and kind of in that footprint too. So I really do like this hire for him, but just think about it like this, instead of thinking, oh, our brand has fallen down, we can't have Lane Kiffin. Like I said, think about how much he was waiting on you and how everybody else wanted him, and that was the second best name of the cycle. So would you have rather Scott Strickland do his own thing, or would you rather him go with conventional wisdom, which is this guy's a good coach, everybody wants him, and you're beating Auburn, which I think that's kind of a failure for Auburn that they couldn't land him.
It is interesting because I went on Vine a couple of weeks ago and he's like, well, how's this all going to shake out? Who's going to go where? And I said, the thing that I feel best about at this moment is Jon Sumrall to Auburn. That felt like the thing that was the most obvious connection to make. And the lack of discussion about the Auburn search made us feel like, well, they're going to do that. And instead, Florida ends up doing this botched pursuit of Lane Kiffin and then pivoting ultimately to Jon Sumrall and doing kind of the thing that was quiet and didn't have a bunch of these, other candidates that were necessarily like leaked out and, hey, this is going to happen. So, the interesting thing is, does this end up being the Mike Elko? Because it feels like that's what they're kind of hoping for, is that, hey, we didn't necessarily make the big splashy move, but we hired the defensive minded guy who just is very well regarded now in coaching circles and looks like a guy that just kind of knows what he's doing. And if we can get to someone that, within 2 years kind of has us back, then we're going to feel really good about this, given his ties to the South and all those different things. So yeah, it is fascinating though, that they ended up with the group of 5 coach from Louisiana. If he wins football games, that's not going to matter. That's not going to matter. Right now, it might matter in terms of alumni support, in terms of fan support. Are you getting people that are going to want to donate to NIL and all these rosters? But that's a short-term issue that could turn into a non-issue in the long term if you play your cards right and hired ultimately the right football coach.
Yeah, and like I said, guys, I know probably as a Florida fan, it's hard to hear this or hard to take me seriously saying this, but it's like, he is, he won Sun Belt Coach of the Year. He won that back to back. And hearing that after the whole Sun Belt Billy thing isn't great, obviously. But like we said, he's won everywhere. I think that it's just there's so much more of a runway. There's so much more of a history. And the Elko comp, I think, is such a great one. Go ahead.
He lost his prize quarterback,
Mhm.
Darian Mensah. They had a post-spring guy with the Jake Ratzlaff thing after the way that played out at BYU. They lost a ton of production there. And they're a 1 win away from playing for the college football playoff, playing in the college football playoff. Like,
And he's not trying to coach his
15-3 in
team.
one-score games. Yeah. Well, he is trying to coach the team. 15-3 in one-score games. This is a guy that, in theory, you did the smart thing while kind of just saying, to hell with the irony, we don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that's the thing is that sometimes the smart move is the one that's kind of right in front of you. And I love the Elko comp. I think that's exactly it. It's like I said, program builder, guy that has an identity and plays a physical style of football, comes from kind of the Southeast region, has been all over Texarkana, Kentucky, Troy, so he has these relationships. And so yeah, Florida is a rebuild. And I think that this was a complete fork in the road moment. You talked about that in the video last night, a complete fork in the road moment for Florida, which is, are we a rebuild or are we a reload? You're a rebuild, but this is a rebuild coach. Stop fooling yourself thinking you're going to go get the hot young offensive coordinator, the Lincoln Riley, the guy who's just going to show up and get a couple of
You
portal
could pair
guys.
him now with the right OC too.
Yeah, exactly, man. And that's exactly, why the Elko thing is such a great comp because you now, with those resources that you pulled together to get Lane Kiffin, you could do exactly what Elko has done
Get your
and go
Colin Klein.
get
Yeah.
the best guy that you can at offensive coordinator, give him autonomy, know who your play caller is. Auburn fans are going, ooh, must be nice. And so, point being, I really do think it is fine to look yourself in the mirror and go, hey, I need to hit the gym a little bit, around the holidays.
Yes.
That's exactly where Florida's at. They're like, hey, six-pack's kind of going away, but we got a plan. We're going to hit some P90X, do some macros, and we'll be right back.
Devastating 8 days for Kentucky. Your dream successor from Mark Stoops just took the bigger job. That sucks. That really sucks. We're going to get to Kentucky later, but that is a brutal pill to have to swallow. They look like maybe the biggest losers in all of this, the way that this is played out.
And we'll
Again,
never know
TBD
because
on
they
that.
didn't even try. That's the rough part of it.
They couldn't.
They could because they kept Mark Stoops, and so they didn't even know they didn't even get the feelers out to say, "Hey, Summerall, you played here. You're a Kentucky guy. If we kind of do this little Robert Dunder push off into the distance thing with Mark Stoops, you're a coach in waiting." No, they just simply didn't come to the table for the coach everybody wanted.
A couple of things. You guys, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that we love Alex Golesh. Okay. And it's not quite when Joe Moorhead got the Mississippi State job, but I have a real appreciation and respect for Alex Golesh. And just for those who quickly, like we've said this before, but those who don't know his background, first generation American, came here from Moscow. His family basically wanted to give their kids a better life, and they moved to Brooklyn. His dad's a truck driver and works at Little Caesars. He falls in love with college football, watching Michigan, Ohio State, watching Tennessee, Florida, and is a guy that is a grinder. Had no sort of like family ties. He's not a nepo baby in the slightest or anything like that. He didn't like grow up in the South or anything related to that. And Alex Golesh, the job that he's done at USF is remarkable. It is second to none, considering there were 4-29 in the 3 years before he was hired. I say all of that because you fired a guy that many thought didn't work hard enough. Alex Golesh corrects that for you. Okay. And I don't know that it's going to work out. I don't know that he's all of a sudden going to get you to the places you want to go and you're going to be winning 10 games every year. But that guy stared down Alabama multiple times and was like, I ain't afraid of you. That probably factored into why Auburn wanted to hire him. This guy, just like Sumrall, was being linked to a lot of these SEC jobs. It looked like earlier in the week he was going to take the Arkansas job. What if the Ole Miss job comes open? Would he be a fit there? And ultimately, like, oh, this guy just got the Auburn job because his offense is proven in the SEC. He's a Josh Heupel disciple, obviously, which is just a fun thing to say out loud. He has the ability to light up the scoreboard. Time of possession is going to be a question mark probably moving forward if there's an issue. But this is somebody that's going to work so unbelievably hard. And you needed a grinder. Like, you needed a grinder for what's ahead. And if I'm looking at these offensive pieces at Auburn and I'm looking around going, maybe that's a little bit more interesting. And I do love Alex Golesh. So you're not going to hear a whole lot of negativity coming from me with Auburn landing him ultimately.
I love Coach Rasputin. No, I actually think this dude rules. And if you guys want to hear, I mean, some of the best.
Go back and listen to our 2 interviews with Alex Golesh that we've done.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, 2 of the best interviews I think we've ever had in this pod was when you talked to Golesh and you kind of told that story. And you could just see that his eyes, when you see someone that is so uniquely focused to a goal, it's like different. It's not like, oh, I came up in this, Saban coaching tree, or I came up in this Brian Kelly coaching tree. It's like, I am here to have this job and get to this place, and no matter what it takes, I'm going to get there. And when you hear a guy talk like that, it's scary, especially for your enemies because go ahead.
This guy, so Hugh Freeze repeatedly got up to the podium and would say, we're so close. We're so close. We keep losing 1-score games. We're so close. Mm-hmm. We're so close all the time. This guy nearly beat Alabama 2 years ago in that slot-filled game. And his takeaway from this was, we're not close. We're not even close. Even if we had won this game, we're not prepared to handle what would have come from this. That was his approach. I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay. And so much about these hires is correcting, what the guy before you was. This guy is wired so differently than Hugh Freeze. It's not even funny.
I am so fascinated to see what he does with resources. I really am, because he might know some dudes. I mean, you might get like some middle school coach that has like this offense you've never seen in your life. I mean, truly, this could be like a Malzahn when he was good style guy, where it's like, who are these guys you brought with you? How are you building this thing? Because you can either go with the current or against the current. And this is the most against the current coach I think I've ever seen. And he's been successful. And again, you have to kind of be a little bit crazy and gaslight yourself. We've seen that in like The Last Dance, the MJ mentality of like, I expect to win everything. Even if I'm at USF, I expect to beat Florida. And when I do, I'm elated. I'm relieved. I'm not shocked. And so, I mean, Golesh is a guy who could build it from the ground up. I think that he's a guy who's been humble. He didn't take anything for granted. And I'm just fascinated to see, because, we can go back and watch the tape of his USF teams. But I think similar to like a Josh Heupel, where it's like, how are you actually going to be when you get the resources, right? Because this team changed so much when he got to the SEC and got the players and was able to build a defense, was able to build a run game that he wasn't at UCF.
I support Alex Golesh getting the job over DJ Durkin. On record there.
Yeah, I mean.
On record there.
Yep. And allegedly it was close. So I think they nailed this hire.
I do too. And Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas. This is a move that Arkansas fans met with angst, frustration that the process played out the way that it did, because it felt like they were waiting everybody else in school to find a date to the dance, and then they basically had to look around and go, well, who's left? And that is a very frustrating place to be. It's the place they were in with Sam Pittman. And Sam Pittman admitted that that's the place that they were in when they ultimately chose him to replace Chad Morris. And while they do have a total rebuild ahead, this is all going to be about alignment. Ryan Silverfield might not have that big Tyson family alignment with all that important money at Arkansas from the jump. He's going to have to earn that. And that's going to be a challenge. If you can't beat him, join him. The job that Ryan Silverfield did at Memphis to be able to beat Arkansas was a huge part of this. But as many have pointed out, 12-20 against teams with a record of 500 or better. I know Liam Blutman at Barstool has been very all over that with Ryan Silverfield. We'll see how much that comes into play, because obviously Sam Pittman's record against top 25 teams was a huge issue, and it just felt like they were going to be staring at a gauntlet every single time. So is he just simply a floor raiser, or is he going to raise your ceiling? Time will tell. He's going to have to do a whale of a rebuild job. I'm very interested to see how this is going to go. But you get another guy that's got an offensive line background who is going to be, hey, we're going to build this thing from the trenches, maybe a little bit like Group of Five Brent Key in some sort of way. Could be some shades of that, but he's going to have an uphill climb. I got news for you. Whoever was getting that Arkansas job has an uphill climb. That's what this past year plus, really last 2.5 years have told us.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one that I feel like could be a little bit underwhelming, especially if you think about how this job was approached from like kind of the whisperings of we're going to take a big swing. Hunter Yurachek having the amount of press that he has recently, as well as being able to land John Calipari. You think to yourself, again, we're at a crossroads here. Can we go get a James Franklin? Can we go get one of these guys that is really at the top of the list and reinvent Arkansas? Because when you look at basketball, they have been able to do that. They've been able to get the coach that nobody expected. Even, Muss, I feel like was a pretty big hire when it happened, even though it didn't really work out. I mean, on the baseball side, they've been a really like a consistent, good program last couple of years. So you figure out the football thing, and suddenly you're kind of like there everywhere. They've been historically a track school and everything. Now, that being said, the questions you have about Ryan Silverfield, right, are that he took over kind of a ready-made Memphis team, right? A team that was in the Cotton Bowl, a team that was at heights they really hadn't seen for a long time, and he got it to pretty good. Like they've been pretty good under him. But the good era of Memphis was certainly before him and under Mike Norvell. And so I think this is exactly what you just said, a floor raiser, because when you have as much chaos that's happening on the football side of Arkansas, the Petrino stuff, a little bit of the misalignment from boosters and stuff, I think you have to have a guy who's at least an adult in the room, who's not going to do anything that's going to embarrass you, and then you give this guy a chance, is he going to be good? Who's to say? But it gives you a chance to reset and kind of go, okay, who are we? What are we? Let's get everything together, because I think they did have eyes somewhere a little bit better, but I don't think it's as bad.
Big day for the American. You're losing all these coaches to the SEC.
Worst day in American history, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. All these power conference coaches get extensions, and instead the American has to lose all these coaches left and right. One quick note before we get to these games. Chris Lowe reported that Lane Kiffin has lined up most of his offensive staff to join him at LSU. And if they're not on the plane to Baton Rouge today, they will not have a spot on his staff.
Revenge of the tarmac. Now who controls the airspaces? Lane Kiffin. He's going to leave you on the tarmac.
I want to see that tarmac. I want to see. He's like looking at his watch. He's like, Charlie West Jr., is he here yet? Are we okay? All right.
How big is this private plane? They got an Airbus out there? Like, you're getting coaches, families? Like, that's not a team plane. This is a fleet they're building.
That's like a football movie move to have that. Well, if you're not there, see ya. You're staying here in Oxford. Wild times. Okay, I said that we would do 15 minutes. We did 30. Let's talk about some actual football games. Well, again, I already said we're not talking about the Egg Bowl, so we're going to skip through that. The Egg Bowl recap was Trinidad Chem got his jersey stolen, and then he just balled out and kind of settled in and looked really, really good. Let's start with the Iron Bowl. I vote that the Iron Bowl should be played at Jordan-Hare every year. It's
like an all-time quarterback situation. It's like they need it. Come on, that's your little brother.
Alabama fans would object in every possible way. But anybody outside of Alabama gonna object to that? We'll make sure it's a pretty, if Alabama's struggling for the NIL money in this day and age, like some have said, they don't have as deep of resources. Let's make sure Alabama's getting its cut, whatever that might look like. But yeah, we got another instant classic in this game. Auburn rallies back after falling behind 17-0, but then Kalen DeBoer makes the call of his career. I do think it is on 4th and 2 to go for it with 4 minutes left in a tie game, and Ty Simpson delivers. Then you get the Bray Hubbard forced fumble of Cam Coleman to seal it. Deontay Lawson, the guy who gets hurt last year in the Oklahoma game, is the one who recovers it. Gutted for Cam Coleman in that moment, by the way. But
Only bad football play that we've seen of him, honestly. It's crazy that happened in that moment.
Brutal. You saw the emotion all over his face, like somebody that's from that state that just knew what that meant in that moment. Like, hate that for Cam Coleman. But Kalen DeBoer earned that win, man. Had to earn that win. He earned that with a call that if it had gone wrong, it would have been discussed for 8 months and then probably well beyond that. Because if that's just a tip pass in that spot and it falls flat and, Bama's got to go to overtime or Auburn takes over, potential game-winning drive there, man, very, very different. That was a fork in the road moment for Kalen DeBoer. And, maybe the Connor Talty drama actually helped in that spot, because instead of just settling for a kick, which I would love to know the percentage of coaches that would have settled for a kick in that moment, it would have been high, because take the lead, take the points. But it's the same thing we've been saying all year, Will. When it's time to put it on the shoulders of Ty Simpson, they feel like they can do it, and he did it. It was an unreal play in that spot.
Sometimes it feels like Kalen DeBoer is a person who has been told the future and has to make it seem like he doesn't. Because in these big moments,
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
in these big moments, it's like, duh, they're just gonna drop the craziest play from like 30-35. It's like, oh, you're gonna audible into a goal, because they did that too. They audibled into a QB sneak out of like shotgun on another 4th down, and it's like, you just know that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer are sitting there, like they got something they were drawn up in when they were roommates back in Sioux Falls or whatever, and they were just like, oh, they've never seen this one in the SEC because it's on VHS. Good luck. Good.
They said that they had called that 4th and 2 to win a game previously, and I was trying to think of which game that was, because I was like, I don't think that wasn't the game winner against South Carolina. Ty Simpson said that after, but like, if you go back and watch that play in that spot too, you also realize you have a true freshman tight end, Caleb Edwards, who's in for Josh Cuevas, which has been kind of a sneaky, significant absence after it looked like he was becoming a safety valve in that offense. And you've got a true freshman tight end that you're trusting to execute this pin down route. And if you're wondering why Isaiah Horton was able to get open again in the end zone for his 3rd touchdown of the day for the Miami transfer, it was very much in part because of this very legal pin down route that was run in that spot. And as DeBoer said afterwards, it was 29 yards shorter than the last time Alabama needed a miracle at Jordan-Hare. So when you put it in perspective like that, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, it's moving from that certainty, and Tennessee fans screamed at their coach for a whole week for trusting a freshman tight end. It just goes to show, hey, you gotta know your role and you gotta execute it. And I think that's what this team is. We've talked about it over and over again. The worst version of the Bama offense was the heliocentric Ryan Williams, where they, everything revolved around him. They gave him all these targets, specifically like more last
He had
year.
none in this game.
Yep.
Will, none.
Yep. And this is a very you can either I'm not gonna say best player. He's not their best player. You can let quote unquote the star beat you. You can let everybody else beat you. Alabama has found a way to, and the freshman tight end point is such a great one because utilize everybody in their role. Nobody is pulling the brunt of the rope, but we're all just pulling an inch at a time. And like I said, in these moments, you have to defend the entire field in a way that is so rare. And if you're an Alabama fan, you can get frustrated at some of these things, but it's just knowing that the ball is going to come out cleanly and that it's going to be this route that's just perfection, crisp, all of that on the offensive side of the ball. That's what Ryan Grubb specifically was brought in to do. And this is when I previewed this Bama team, when I drafted him as high as I did in the preseason draft. It's the only pick that worked out for me. And just after the FSU game, I was like, well, you're wrong again, Will. You're 0 for whatever. But that being said, this is what they were hired to do, was exactly these moments in the SEC, saying schematically, we're just smarter than you. And we have the talent to where, yeah, we're not going to have Derrick Henry and fall forward for 6 yards, but you don't know who we have, and that's the scary part.
Jam Miller was running really well in this game, and then he gets hurt yet again. And so you even knew in that spot, especially with the pressure that DJ Durkin was dialing up, Auburn's going to bring some heat whenever it was a crunch time spot, Auburn was bringing some heat. Now, sometimes they were able to get home, and other times Ty Simpson made big time plays. And it's not necessarily going to be remembered the 4th and 2 as stunning as Gravedigger was, but that game was going to come down to that exact dynamic that you mentioned there. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden this pushes Alabama to win a national championship, especially after this ground game is now what's the identity going to be after it looks like Jan Miller was figuring things out. But you couldn't lose that if you're Kalen DeBoer. You couldn't lose it, and you couldn't lose it in that way, not to an interim coach with a 5-win season, especially knowing that if you lose, you're on every hot seat list in America for somehow squandering that playoff opportunity by losing your final 2 SEC games. And I just give Kalen DeBoer a lot of credit for not turtling in that moment. He was fighting tears in the post-game interview, and Ty Simpson comes over to him, and Simpson, he kind of leans his shoulder on him, and it was like this touching moment with Holly Rowe in which you're reminded, man, this has been an emotional roller coaster from this team. And to get to this spot where I do think Alabama, with the precedent that SMU has established last year with being able to get into the college football playoff, even with a conference championship loss, I do think now by Alabama clinching that spot in the SEC championship has all but locked up a bid. Again, crazier things have happened, but man, it was everything to finish that game like that.
Yeah, and it really goes down to honestly, you gotta pet DJ Durkin. Hate to credit DJ Durkin, but you gotta credit him for having his defense playing the way that they have really all year. It's one of the most inexplicable things that we've seen, and we've keyed in on it probably even before some of the people were talking about the point streaks and all that. But the way that this was a chess match specifically on that side of the ball between those two great offensive minds and DJ Durkin, who's now obviously been elevated to the head coach, just goes to show Auburn does have a lot of talent still left over, and they're going to be fine. They have the ability with the right head coach. But that being said, the story really is, like you said, Alabama, and I love the comp to Gravedigger, but I will say this: Gravedigger was necessary. There was no other option but Gravedigger. This to me is it's bolder because you had the option to not do it. And again, that's what we've been hitting on: trust in your guys, and spinning that forward to the SEC championship game. I am so excited about this game because it's two teams that you could describe in almost exactly the same way. Redemption story for the offensive coordinator. Quarterbacks that are hitting on all cylinders. Offenses that you don't know where the ball is going to go, but they hit you. They play as a team. They're not selfish. And that game, I think, is going to be so electric. And I mean, if you're Kirby Smart, you want to stomp Bama into the dust, obviously, so they can't get in, but you got to worry about beating Bama first, And so I think that's the scariest matchup if you're Kirby, if you're Georgia, because despite all of the stats you want to throw out, Saban's gone, whatever. Oh, it's not in here or there. You just can't kill this team. It's a team of two zombies just ripping each other apart in the SEC championship game.
And Auburn learned the hard way that you couldn't kill them by all the pressure that they just tried to send repeatedly. Like the 4th and 1 play that Simpson had where he's or not the 4th and 1 play. There was the scramble that he had, which was impressive too, where he kind of just is searching for any sort of running lane. He's able to ultimately get the first down with 8 minutes left in the 4th quarter to extend the drive there. Was huge at midfield. But the first touchdown of the game, where he's backpedaling for days, and Auburn's got 3 guys that look like they're about to take him down in such a difficult touch throw that he makes in the back of the end zone. And man, that's he's been building for moments like that. And to see Ty Simpson make those big time plays, I don't know what his legacy at Alabama is going to be, but that's definitely going to be remembered in so many ways. And just full circle with the Bray Hubbard element of the forced fumble of Cam Coleman, the guy that just got ripped week 1 for the Florida State performance. And now I find myself asking this question, Will.
When are we getting Doug Lesmerises on?
Doug Lesmerises, we've already dragged Doug enough.
I'm just kidding.
But it is worth revisiting because at the time when Doug comes on and says it's over, it's done, it wasn't even a situation where Kalen DeBoer was facing pressure anymore at Alabama. It was a foregone conclusion after week 1 that he was cooked and this was ending in 2 years. And instead, I now ask this question: is the pressure off Bama? Because you could tell me it's still a championship standard and that Kalen DeBoer's time in Tuscaloosa is going to be defined by whether or not he's able to win a national championship, and probably win a national championship without what's deemed Nick Saban's players, right? So I get that. But I know that just getting there and getting over the hump by winning the way that they've had to win and getting to an SEC championship is going to be significant. So now I kind of wonder, like, will they approach this going, hey, that was the hurdle we had to get over. Let's go out and beat Kirby again, because all the pressure now you could say is on Georgia to get over the Alabama thing. Whether or not Georgia is truly, going to be hung up on winning this game is, I guess, another subject for another time. But I think Bama can get a first round bye if it wins the SEC championship. I think that would be in play for how the selection committee has valued the SEC this year. And my guess is that Bama will still be at 10, but it can go as high as 4. And that would mean jumping fellow 2-loss Oklahoma, because if you win an SEC championship, especially by beating Georgia twice, that would probably carry a lot of weight. So that's the question that I'm wondering is the pressure now off of Bama going into this?
I'll say it like this, and I really don't mean to be condescending. I'm speaking to privilege here. I wish I was in this situation, but Alabama fans, you have not known what it's like to doubt your head coach since like the Bush administration. So here's a tip from someone who's had a couple of coaches. Okay, when you turn on your coach, or when you say we're not happy, when you do all this, that's a dream for a fan base like LSU, Georgia, Auburn, because they could say trouble in Tuscaloosa, da da da. But I'm here to tell you, as an LSU fan who's, like I said, thrilled that we have Lane Kiffin now. There's no scarier coach to see right now in the playoff than Kalen DeBoer with nothing to lose. And
That's a
so
good point, Will.
just know it like that. This is not, your daddy's Alabama team, but this is not the BCS. Okay. And what you have is a chance, and you're going to have that every year. And there is no dominant team in college football. As we see, even Ohio State has a back and forth game with Michigan after getting beat by them several years in a row. And so just know this, your mental version of the standard, being the guy who follows Nick Saban was almost impossible. And people said, oh, he's not going to recruit. I said that. I was wrong. They said he couldn't win in the SEC. I didn't say that. I always thought he was a winner. But he's won these big games. He's beat your rivals. And I think it's a really big deal to say, we're happy with this guy moving forward, and we trust what he's building here, because it's only going to get better from here as he brings in these recruits.
I think that this was just, well, it's going to be remembered as one of the biggest regular season wins that a coach has had in a while. Even if Bama doesn't win a national championship, like, will this go down as the biggest regular season win of the 12-team playoff era? Time will tell. We will see. But yeah, we will talk much more Bama with the preview pod.
And really quick,
for the
man,
SEC
just really quick. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but you talked about sliding doors moment too in that video. And man, I mean, when you think about how quickly these coaches were hired, the way that we would have been sitting there doing math if Bama had lost, you know what I'm saying? And worried, what is the selection committee going to think about this? What are they going to think about this? It's impossible to convince me that at least one coaching hire wouldn't be different if that game is lost, considering the amount of teams that were hanging in the balance. So truly a massive moment in college football history.
Seriously. Yeah, we'll look back on it and maybe help define the 2020s, because on the Auburn side, DJ Durkin, if he wins that game, is he the head coach at Auburn? I mean, like, that seemed like it was a real possibility for John Cohen to make that move, but ultimately, I think Auburn has itself to blame, and you could blame officials for some of that stuff, right? You definitely could. That's been the story of the year, but you also had 5 drops, 4 fumbles. Thought it could have been 5, 10 penalties. You're not good enough to overcome that against a top 10 team. And that's reality. Maybe that's a tough pill to swallow, and it's just easier to blame the officiating, because I know the roughing call on Ty Simpson, that was, for lack of a better word, rough. It was. And I know DJ Durkin wanted the push-off called on the first Horton touchdown with the miraculous Simpson play, the backpedal. I get that. But Auburn, you had opportunities there. You had opportunities.
Thankful officiating gave you a chance at the win there at the end, because they could have just held their flags at the end of that game too, and I've seen that a ton. So, I mean, Cam Coleman fumbling is Cam Coleman fumbling. You got nobody to blame there.
Yeah. Auburn is now 6-16 against power conference competition in that building post Gus Malzahn. Bama has 3 consecutive wins at Jordan-Hare, all of which thrillers. Auburn, meanwhile, 5 consecutive losing seasons. That is the rebuild that is in store for Alex Golesh. First time since Harry Truman administration, 1946 to 1950, that Auburn has had 5 consecutive losing seasons. They will not be in the postseason. Yeah, I would truly hate it if that was Auburn's last bit of Cam Coleman. That's the thing that I keep coming back to is, man, I know this is going to be a rebuild. I think there are pieces obviously there that will stay and that will be really beneficial. But and as much as I want to see Cam Coleman now in an ideal situation with a quarterback that can feed him the rock as much as possible, that to me just doesn't sit well. And I would hate that for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, Texas A&M, Texas. Will, Texas deserves a ton of credit for what it did to hand Texas A&M its first loss of the season. I won't even say that winning that game was just the byproduct of Marcel Reed tweaking his ankle, because Marcel Reed did enough things in that game to make you feel like if he's out there and able to move laterally, okay, then this isn't some game with an asterisk. Texas very much earned that. To do that without Anthony Hill Jr., a lot of respect for a defense that it looked like it was reeling with 4 consecutive games, allowing 31 points. Texas took over this game in the second half. For whatever reason, Ethan Burke just makes every big play against Texas A&M, especially on fourth down. It's wild how much A&M struggled on fourth down in these 2 games as now renewed rivals. But this game in a nutshell was what the preseason number 1 team should have looked like. It is a shame that the preseason number 1 team took so long to look the part and instead is crying about being wronged about the schedule and the conference that it joined, knowing that it was going to have a more difficult schedule. We're going to get to A&M in a bit here, Will. But my goodness, did Sark lay it on thick after this one. Thick. Like, guy, we get it. We get it. You've been saying this for weeks. And he gets up there and he's like, it would be a disservice to college football if the Ohio State loss cost Texas a playoff berth, because they could have scheduled someone else and been tended to. Texas acting like they did this for the good of the sport. And you know what? We're all trying to figure out who did this and who put Ohio State on the schedule. You did. And you joined the SEC. And you did. And did you think that you could just go 8-4 and make and that would be the thing that would keep you out of the college football playoff? Because what you're saying is both true and ridiculous at the same time. If you had just played, I don't know, like Cal Poly instead of Ohio State, yeah, you're probably in the playoff. Are you also just ignoring the upside of what an Ohio State win would have done? And are you pretending like you didn't get any grace whatsoever? Because you still lost to Florida, man. You still lost to Florida. 4-8 Florida, who got waxed by Tennessee, who lost to USF and in that same building. So and also don't get dummied by Georgia, and your resume looks a whole lot better. Okay. I've grew so sick of this Texas team. I really did. And meanwhile, Sark is up there saying that they nearly outgained Ohio State by 200 yards. They outgained Ohio State by 133 yards. 98 of which came in the latter half of the fourth quarter when Ohio State was preserving a 14-0 lead. And he's trying to make it seem like they actually controlled that game. Nobody. Your defense played really well. You did not control that game. 133
and we're all looking for the guy who did this, because you're exactly right. The defense was good. The run game was pretty good. What was the issue in that Ohio State game? Because it was there to be had. Who's calling this play, Sark?
Seriously. Nobody watched Texas go to overtime at Kentucky and Mississippi State and thought, yep, that's a championship team who just, you know what, they just got wronged by their schedule. No, but it's all about what Sark is trying to spin, and I get it. Like, we heard the stat when Texas was 7-3. We'll mention it again. They're the first team since 2019 LSU to beat 3 AP top 10 teams in the regular season. That is excluding conference championships. Okay, that is really impressive. It is. Cheers to that. Great feat. But you made the decision to leave the Big 12. You did. You signed up for this schedule. I don't then want to hear about how difficult your schedule was and that you got no grace whatsoever. You got grace, okay? I don't think Texas is worthy of making the college football playoff. If they had looked the part and been dominant in some of these other games, all right, but you're out there letting up 37 and 500 yards to Arkansas. Miss me.
I thought we were Robert Patrick appreciators. No, okay, so there's a lot to cover there, right? To your point, congrats to Texas on the win here. I think it was a big statement for this defense. Marcel Reed, who's, handing out some great Heisman memorabilia. Again, strict conditioning staff that's been going on podcasts for a long time. You were able to.
I didn't get any of that Heisman memorabilia. That rubbed me the wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I would have liked it, but I didn't get any.
Yeah, it's they probably said it to like all the LSU media. They were like, "Here you go, have fun." It was all got left in Tiger Stadium. Anyway, that was the Heisman. That dude looked like the best quarterback I'd seen that day. Anyway, so point being, right? Like, I think it's a big win for Texas, so I don't want to glaze over that. I don't want to say
huge.
This is a true. We talked about them being casual and then being, a little bit soft, but here's the problem, right? A&M is at the top of the conference. You have a moment where I feel like a rare case for Texas, where you are truly the underdog, and America is rooting against you but rooting for you by default because they need A&M to lose. They want to see chaos. This is the only really chaotic result, and it
Was that the case though? Because A&M's already in the playoff.
well, as far as the SEC championship, I think it's funny, for a neutral fan for A&M to go undefeated through 11 weeks and then not make the SEC championship game. I think if you're
Was
if you're worried about A&M or if you're thinking, hey, A&M's on the rise, that's a dream result for you, right? And so Texas is Texas, right? Anyway, so that being said, you finally got a point where you could have been a little bit likable. You got Mike Elko at the post game, like, can we go to a professional press conference? And they found a way to be less likable than that. And I give them credit because they keep doing it. And it's like, the only real big wins they've had in the SEC are against former Big 12 teams. They're against Texas A&M and they're against Oklahoma. Okay. And that makes me think of the famous now Kirby Smart quote after he played Texas about transfers. Do you remember this?
the we schedule, like, if we see that a guy is, like, guys that hit the portal, like, those are the teams that we want to schedule
Yep.
because they're not tough enough. I'm butchering the
Yeah,
exact
yeah, yeah.
quote,
I got,
but
I
that's
got.
the
You know
extent.
exactly what I'm talking about. A guy right in front of me. He came out after the game and said, we come here and we hit people, we be physical. Somebody said, what do you do if a guy transfers? And he says, we find their team, we schedule them. The ones that want to leave, we schedule them. We try to get them on the schedule because if they want to leave, it's because they're not physical. Okay, your hurdle is not Texas A&M. If you wanted that, you would stay in the Big 12. All right, your hurdle is Georgia. Your hurdle is Alabama. Your hurdle is these teams that have been, in this conference and champions and like really winning playoff games and doing this stuff. And you can't, after every loss and every win, come out chirping and doing the Dan Mullen about we had more yards than you. Like, dude, you're either
Tell me about the Kentucky yards. 179 that game?
yeah. I mean, like you're a special teamer away from being like fighting for a non-Birmingham bowl, right? And so I think saying we're proud of our team and how they've responded to this is a fine enough thing to do. To say we're a different team today than we were against Ohio State. To say that Arch Manning has made progress over the course of this year and he's now a quarterback that we trust in these big moments. Fine. Our run game's come together. Our defense, fine. But when you start to act like everybody was wrong, where you say, hey, he picked against us. This guy right here picked against us. Yeah, sometimes you made me wish I had picked Kentucky and Mississippi State against you.
The point that Sark is really trying to drive home, it feels like it's directed at Notre Dame. And it feels like he's basically saying, hey, if you schedule these big time, premier non-conference games, and if it just doesn't matter, or if it's only going to hurt you, then, what's the point of doing this? College football is in a worse place. Like, it feels like he was going after Notre Dame. The irony is that A&M is the team that scheduled the big time non-conference game with Notre Dame. It won that game. And if it didn't win that game, it would be getting the 2024 Indiana treatment because of how favorable the conference schedule draw was for A&M this year. And A&M benefited greatly from that Notre Dame win. So much. So for Sark to just pretend that there's only downside for those games is wrong. It is wrong. And I do think that he is looking at this from such an obtuse place. And Texas fans, if you're getting upset with me saying this, in your heart of hearts, because you've seen the last 2 years what a real college football playoff team looks like. You did not have that this year, okay? You just didn't. And that's okay to admit, even if it means going against the grain, and even if it does feel like you left some meat on the bone, because that's what this team did all year. So for me, I have such little patience with how Texas has just repeatedly talked about being wronged by the sport. I get it. You're always going to make your case to get in the college ball playoff. People are listening to this saying, what's Sark supposed to do? Of course he's going to say that his team belongs in the playoff.
Don't be
Say it's a
condescending about
disservice for
losing.
college football.
Sorry, don't be condescending after losing to Florida. I think you exactly hit on that. I've said this time and again where I've followed the sport for 30 years, and the thought of being a 2, let alone 3-loss team and having a shot at a championship is so foreign. It's
Right?
within the last couple of years since Ohio State 2014, where that was even a remote possibility outside of the chaos of 07, and now people are just indignant about, what do you mean this team can't make it? And every team that's on that bubble has a loss or two where you go, dude, if you're this good of a team, beat this team. I will not have any sympathy for a team, especially in a power conference, Big Ten, SEC, getting left out,
Yeah. This year is difficult. It's really difficult. Okay. You got 1-loss teams that are like, I don't know that we're getting in. you got a team like BYU that's got 1 loss there in the regular season. And yes, they lost to Texas Tech, but they've also they've also had a really good resume that nobody's really talking about. And this notion of like, well, you know what, it's just simply the byproduct of our non-conference scheduling and just ignoring everything else that's happened. It's maddening. Okay, we've done enough probably on the Texas thing. Just real quick on Texas A&M, a couple of different lenses you can look through if you're an Aggie listening to this. The optimistic lens is that Marcel Reed doesn't have to risk further injury in an SEC championship. Maybe that's good.
That's big win right there. Get him on some
Maybe.
ice, let him chill,
Yeah, you're still going to get a home playoff game, very likely. And if you had told any A&M fan that coming into the year, they would have been giddy. Get Reed, get Le'Veon Moss healthy, enjoy the blessing of being idle, knowing that your spot is safe, and knowing that you're going to probably have 108,000 people in your corner the next time you play ultimately for a national championship, which you have not been able to do in the playoff era. Okay, so those things are all really, really good. And you could do, if you're Mike Elko, the spin zone, 2021 Georgia, they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship. They were able to reset. They were able to win it all. Ohio State last year, they were able to hit the reset button. They were able to win a national championship. 2017 Alabama, they lost the regular season finale just like you did in a rivalry game, and they end up winning it all. 3 of the last 8 champs, they had late season losses and ultimately were able to turn around. You can tell your team, we can be that. Whether or not they will be, TBD. The bad news, this was right there. This was right there. You're playing well. You're playing well on the road. You're frustrating Arch Manning. I'm out here talking about like the Todd McShay pregame assumption that Arch Manning was going to be heads and shoulders above Marcel Reed and that they're going to have a significant advantage at quarterback. And I'm cold taking that at halftime. So I'm like, buddy, that is not the case at all. And you had them right where you wanted them. It looked like Casey Concepcion was going to be the MVP of this game. I loved the fire that Torian York brought to this game with his 15 pages of notes on Texas. You know me, I love 15 pages of notes. That's speaking to my heart right there.
Oh, the Connor linebacker there. He's got a Google Doc. He's got this little wristwatch. He's got, you can't fool me. I'm familiar with your game.
Torian York just moved up my big board for the NFL draft significantly. Arch was just in shambles against this defense for a lot of that first half. And instead, you let this game slip away because you stopped generating pressure. Marcel Reed started forcing throws, and there were some shades of first half South Carolina in his game. And you finally let Texas have that first 100-yard rusher all year. Wisner looked good. He was getting big holes to run through. And don't tell me that didn't matter to A&M because it did. And 12-0 with a win against Texas to finally get bragging rights against them, finally getting to an SEC championship for the first time since 1998, in a conference championship, I should say. That would have been sweet. And you had the benefit of the sometimes up and down Big 12, like at different points to end that drought, and you couldn't do it. You had 2 years of Johnny Manziel, you couldn't do it. And you had 2 one-loss seasons in the 2020s, and you still couldn't get to a conference championship. All of that kind of stings. And I think it's okay to feel like you let an opportunity slip away, even if you still have everything ahead of you.
Yeah, it's a couple of things, right? Because this is not a season-ending loss like we talked about. Like it probably could have been in lots of eras of college football. Now, it is a little funny to your point that if your fight song is about beating a certain team and you don't beat them for like 5,000 days and then you get 2 chances and you go in 2, maybe change your fight song a little bit. I saw Mike the Tiger's ears off, whatever you got to do, right? But that being said, to your point, this is the game for A&M. This is the opportunity. This was the year to prove not only are we a power in the SEC, but honestly, in the state of Texas, you know how big football is. Being the best team in Texas in a year where Texas State, Texas State is up, but Texas Tech is up, right? Where Texas is up. And you could say we are the state champions of Texas. We could use that in recruiting and all that. That's a big deal. Now, that being said, season's not over. What I will say for A&M is maybe they do need to read their own press clippings a little bit and be this physical team that smacked my LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge. That's the team that I haven't seen since then. I've seen a team that has had to lean on Marcel Reed, and against South Carolina, he was able to do that. He was able to play just what? Go ahead.
Do you think they're almost trying to tell you that Marcel Reed can throw better than you think he can, and they're forcing the action that way? Because I do think there's some of that.
You said it. I would go there because I was going to sound like a hater, but you said it. There's no reason why, if you have this multifaceted offense, if you have these skill players, if you have this great offensive line, if you have these different threats from the running game, you can run end arounds and do creative stuff with your 2 great receivers. This is not, Texas Tech with Mike Leach. You don't need to spread the ball around all these different guys. be physical, trust your DNA, embody your head coach, smack the mess out of somebody. Go hit somebody. Like I was just talking about with Georgia. That's how A&M got here. You can talk about the competition. You can talk about whatever. But in these big moments, it can't be we put everything on Marcel Reed and we hope he saves us. It worked against South Carolina. South Carolina's not going to the playoff. You know what I'm saying? Against A&M, it feels like some of that started to happen where you start getting gashed in the run game. Your D-line now is starting to get pushed around a little bit. You need to go out there and assert yourself and say, we're an undefeated SEC team and we belong here. And when you get to the playoff, that's the stuff that I feel like Alabama can do, even though they can't run the ball in the regular season, that I have questions about A&M because when it was fun, they did it. When it got hard, they couldn't. And so I think you have just a loss like this can do just enough to motivate you to say, hey, nobody believes in us. We just got embarrassed. Let's go punch somebody. And that could be exactly what they need going forward.
Nobody's going to be talking about A&M going to the playoff. Nobody. And I get it. I don't necessarily blame those people, but that's what you can sell if you're Mike Elko and you do have a chance to now be that physical team. And I do think Marcel Reed has been playing quarterback very well for most of the year, but this has not been the best few games for Colin Klein. Not been the best from a game planning standpoint. And they do kind of need to hit the reset. And maybe you do so in a loss. Teams obviously would like to be able to do so in a win, but A&M doesn't have that luxury. Very fascinating ranking coming up on Tuesday night for both Texas A&M and Texas. I think we will have a lot of takeaways from that. Okay. Will, are you ready to talk about LSU in non-Lane Kiffin context?
I don't know why we got to talk about this game. Set football back 100 years. Oklahoma's going to the playoff, and that's the best thing that they got out of this game.
This was the ultimate survive and advance game for Oklahoma. Oklahoma fends off LSU because basically LSU forgot to cover Isaiah Satania. I mean, oh my God. What a go-ahead touchdown coverage breakdown that LSU ultimately had in the biggest moment of this game. Nobody within a 50-mile radius of Isaiah Satania on that go-ahead touchdown. Oklahoma is 10-2, very likely hosting a home college football playoff game. There are still some things that can happen that would prevent that from happening. Like Alabama getting in and bumping them to the 9 seed. So that could still happen. I don't want to say that's a certainty, but Oklahoma at the very least, they will be going to the college football playoff. And despite the fact that I think we could say a lot of good things again about this defense, how much I love Peyton Bowen, the interception that he makes in the end zone when Michael Van Buren very clearly should have just run the football in, baffling that he did that.
I was going to say really quick, Connor, that was the second dumbest thing. You know what? Leaving Satania open might not even make the 14 playoff of dumb things LSU did in this game. Because the fact that they were able to almost get a pick six, I literally said to my family, they should have punched that in. They're not going to be able to score. Very next play,
Harold Perkins should have punched it in. And John Mateer makes a big-time play in that spot to be able to not have that happen and run him down.
Connor, I got a question for you. Was the most catchable ball thrown by either team to Bowen in the end zone by Michael Van Buren? Because it was like he blended into that Oklahoma end zone, and it was like, whoa, where'd that guy come from? He's right there. And so, yeah, I think, LSU's offense, hey, good news. You got an offensive head coach coming in. But like I said, no positives for LSU. This whole thing is a reset. If you're Michael Van Buren, you had an opportunity to win that game and to keep yourself on the roster in a starting position. I do feel sorry for them because of what they've gone through this year and, the play callers and all that. Not where you ever want to show tape, right? Back-to-back years for him, Mississippi State, and now this kind of in a rough situation. But that being said, this is how Oklahoma wins. It's never pretty. And another team that's really scary to see in the postseason because they made Alabama look like LSU. So at the end of the day, LSU is comfortable being LSU because they don't know what they're going to do next. That's how
you have the benefit too, if you're Oklahoma, of selling nobody wants us here. Tom Fornelli's tweet that Jim Nagy clapped back at. It's like, are we sure we want to let Oklahoma into the playoff with an offense this bad?
Get the Boz to carry your flag to midfield when you make the playoff, bro. I don't know how the seeding's going to work out. Do you think they're going to be at home?
Yeah, I do think that the most likely scenario is still with them at home. And knowing that I already said I think Bama would jump them if they won the SEC championship, but Bama would still have to do that. I'd have to break down all the other scenarios of how that's going to work. But yeah, I mean, some of that will depend on no, they're not going to jump Oregon because Oregon's got the one loss. I don't think the Big Ten championship loser is going to fall out of that. It's not a certainty. Maybe it will come down to whether or not Alabama wins the SEC championship, which is ironic because Oklahoma obviously beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. But I'd say 8-9 line seems pretty imminent.
And hey, listen to this one, Sark. Guess what really helps them here? Beating Michigan, a Michigan team that ended the year very well. I think that's going to do a lot for Oklahoma, to where they're not going to be clinching the way a lot of teams are.
Yeah, they're in.
Yeah,
They're in.
exactly. And so that being said, man, get the Boz to carry your flag. Nobody likes us. We're like you talked about the Eagles. We're the Eagles. We're from Norman. Nobody likes us. We don't care. Get the Boz. So, and like I'm ready to see this team just make a grind fest out of like an Oregon or something. That would be awesome.
Here's the thing. Do Oklahoma's fans even like them? They do. They love the defense. This is what they signed up for. They love the defense. They were booing the offense. I mean, they were booing the offense plenty in this game.
Because they got pride. That offense looked bad, man.
It was terrible. Oh my God, Mateer throwing these interceptions. They're failing to pick up 4th and 1 as he's like, trying to, use his feet to be able to find some sort of a running lane. It just couldn't do anything offensively. Well, they haven't had 360 yards of offense in a game since week 3. This is week 3, okay? It is not a good unit, and you know that it's not good. But you know what? Here's the thing. You talk about embracing the villain role, embrace the Boz role. I love whenever they show the Boz on the sideline of these games. He's always there. 99% of fan bases would trade places with Oklahoma right now. That's reality. You could tell me they're unwatchable. They would trade places with them, because earning a playoff berth after 6 regular season games against ranked foes is no small feat, especially when you knew what the conversations were entering the year. We've talked about this with Brent Venables. Brent Venables was overjoyed with this one. You could have told him that they won this game 2-0, and he would have probably been just as ecstatic at the end of that game. And I don't blame him. I really don't. And I've got a ton of experience in this area as a fan, okay? This is different for you as a Saints fan than it is for me as a Bears fan. Formative years of my football fandom were spent rooting for a Bears team that had an insane defense, that had the same thought of you of like, oh, if that's not a pick 6 and he gets stopped at the 3-yard line, are they going to score? Are we sure they're going to score?
Sleeping on my boy Thomas Q. Jones, the famous actor. Come on now, the GOAT.
I do love Thomas Jones. I love Matt Forte. Those backs were so underrated. But you had a QB that kind of plays YOLO ball a little bit too much, which Rex Grossman did many a time. Okay. And you also had a home run hitter on special teams who could just erase all of it. Isaiah Satania, Devin Hester, like similar type thing. It is hard. It is really hard. I'm sure Oklahoma fans are so conflicted, feeling like I booed this team in the middle of the 3rd quarter as they're in jeopardy of losing the playoff berth to LSU as a double-digit favorite. And yet I still feel like I want to see this team through. And this is going to be a team that's going to get roasted. Just embrace that. Your team is going to get roasted because of how bad your offense has been. Nobody's going to take Oklahoma seriously because of how limited this offense looks. And until we see John Mateer correct some of these mistakes that he's been making down the stretch here, that's going to continue to happen. But man, you're 10-2. And be thankful for that, even if it is maybe a little bit shades of 2024 Tennessee.
Another fork in the road game for sure, because obviously after a loss, back-to-back losses, I guess, to Texas, you're sitting in a situation where if you lose to this bad LSU team at home, your season goes very differently. You're viewed, oh, well, we got right there. We beat Alabama 2 years in a row. What did it matter? Those wins become cheapened because, again, last year they were able to do that. What did they get out of it? And so I'd say it like this. We made the jokes about Lincoln Riley, who obviously is not in the college football playoff and may never be, with the way his boys get up for big games.
Hasn't gotten there yet, Will. Hasn't gotten there yet.
Even with NFL legend Caleb Williams. And so I love that guy. It still wasn't out of that guy. Anyway.
9-3.
Yeah, exactly, man. And so that being said, though, it's like they took like a Freaky Friday situation where they went, this is what Oklahoma was our entire life. This is what Lincoln Riley was. So we're going to build the exact opposite of that, right? And what goes so unheralded is how bad this defense was, even in year 1 under Venables, right? When they were back in the Big 12, whenever they just couldn't stop a nosebleed. That's the part that goes underrated, because we see, oh, Venables is the defensive guy. Of course he'll figure it out. It was not, of course he'll figure it out. Okay, it wasn't. When he got here, the team that you first saw that had the Riley players and the team you see now are night and day different. And I said it at the time, the key is going to be recruiting the trenches. The key is going to be getting guys that punch you in the mouth. And Oklahoma is like close right there with Alabama and Georgia, and even more so than Alabama, with guys that can punch you in the mouth, And that's what you need to do to win the SEC. So as trivial as it sounds, and I'm not as dumb as it sounds, I'm not minimizing it. All you got to do, quote unquote, is figure out the quarterback. But if you're an Oklahoma fan, you've had that your whole life. And what has it got you? So having a pretty offense that gets out physical, you've seen that movie before. Let's try something new where we can be the ugly team that would creep up on one of those flashy teams.
Who's got more of a "how do you like me now" opportunity ahead in the college football playoff? Brent Venables or Pete Golding, if Pete Golding is indeed Ole Miss's interim coach?
I gotta see this field, man. I gotta see the field because the opponent matters so much. But Golding is there. I think DeBoer is right there too, where he could get a matchup with a team and
Yeah,
just blow them out of the building and go, all right. Oh, I
yeah,
couldn't recruit Tuscaloosa County. Anyway.
yeah. All right, we'll whip through these. We still have a ton of games to get to. We'll whip through some of these last ones here. Vandy and Tennessee. Turns out, well, Vandy does indeed run Tennessee.
That's a quote.
Who would have
That's
thought?
from Diego Pavia.
The Bussin' with the Boys interview that many people thought was just going to be something that hung over him and was cold take left and right. Man, kind of hasn't been. And yeah, he didn't get the win against Bama again. He still beat Bama last year too. Vandy runs Tennessee now because how else can you explain going into Neyland and scoring 31 of the final 34 points in a 3-touchdown win, 45-24? Man, sloppy Diego Pavia start and a vintage Diego Pavia finish in this one. I actually think the Cedric Alexander hurdle. I don't know if you're watching it in real time. It was one of those like you that you see if you're
What was
watching
that
on a
again, Connor?
multi-view. You.
I feel
Sometimes
you.
you make
Yes, I retweet that. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you just make inaudible noises while you're watching, a million hours of college football on a given Saturday. It happens. You're watching all these games go on, and your eyes are kind of programmed to like shift to one thing if one thing happens. And then when you see a guy hurdle someone in the middle of the field, you're like, note that. Note that has my attention, Cedric Alexander. Very, very impressive. I actually thought that was kind of the turning point for Vandy when they got this emotional lift right after that because they were down 21-14 late in the first half. And then after that, Diego Pavia was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He did so in a window in which everybody probably should have been watching him because the afternoon window kind of stunk on Saturday. And man, he ends up having a career high 165 rushing yards against a Tennessee team that he made them look like they're Virginia Tech. Did this feel like that, or did this feel like that?
Yeah, I talked about kind of, the best case for Vandy is that, yeah, you look back at their schedule and there aren't these ranked wins. Well, they kind of ended the season of these 4 different teams. Well, Tennessee, you could argue they did the exact same thing. Where
Probably going to
Tennessee
fall out
was,
of the top 25.
yeah, where
Yeah.
Tennessee was sitting there going, if we have a convincing win against Vanderbilt, how's our resume different than Texas? Nope, you're out of here. You're gone.
Yeah.
You are now questioning your head coach, which is stupid. Like that's the difference in one game locked in a phone booth with this Vanderbilt team.
Yeah. The Josh Heupel questions. Yeesh. Still have a chance to win 9 games, and who knows what the bowl game draw is going to look like and all that. So not to put lipstick on a pig because losing by 3 touchdowns at home to Vandy is not the plan. It is not the plan at all at any point. And Josh Heupel knows that. And there are a lot of camera shots of him where he was kind of stunned to be in that spot. He is not used to being out schemed. It's been a disastrous year for that Tennessee defense, which just could never, ever find the answer to be able to make open field tackles, to be able to have, what they needed on the outside at corner. Like this has just been really, really rough. And who knows what it's going to mean for Tim Banks, a guy that was a Broyles Awards semifinalist or finalist last year. Nonetheless, that was considered a major strength for this team. But yeah, Diego Pavia, once again, as you mentioned, kind of breaking a team and making a team question everything. Well, I think he's a lock for New York now. And not just because he said afterwards with Cole, take me to New York. Not just because he said that. All he did was put up 433 yards of offense. He's over 4,000 yards of offense on the season. SEC Final had this stat too. And I'm kind of mad at myself I didn't have this first. 5th game that Diego Pavia has had this year with 400 yards of offense. That is 2 more than anybody in the sport. Yeah.
Connor, this is a game where Vandy lost to turnover battle 0-2.
He was forcing stuff early. He had 2 picks. First time he had 2 picks in a game since the Texas game last year. He didn't look particularly good early on throwing the football.
Yeah, he had, and people be, oh, he had the fumble against
He had chunk plays.
He had the fumble against Bama, 2 turnovers, whatever. But that being said, how do you overcome that and just put belt to butt the way that they have here? 580 yards of total offense. I mean, just doesn't matter. Could have had 4 turnovers and still run this game going away. So yeah, it's if you really do, and I said this about Tennessee, where I said, kind of wherever they go from here, it was a nice season. You thought you were going to be this 6-win team. Well, when you saw what Aguilar was, you saw what your receivers were. you had an ability to at least, I don't know, beat like a team with a winning record or a bowl team or something like that this season. So I think now it's still a disappointing season. I think to your point, you have a lot of questions asked, a lot of the similar ones we've been asking about some of the teams today, which is how do you go from this team that was just making you, guard their run game and was making you just putting you in hell to now being put in hell with a Vandy team that it feels like have just systemically built this weird empire in Nashville. You see the 5-star Curtis that is now projected to go to Vandy. The scary thing here is I think Vandy's just getting started, man. I don't think this as impressive as what Diego Pavia did, and we talked about how he is going to be the gateway that starts this thing. I think this Vandy team is going to get better from here, man.
Clark Lee stays. He gets an extension. He gets a new deal. Lost in the shuffle of all of this as this is happening. If you're Josh Heupel, do you consider looking across that sideline and going, Steve Gregory, why don't you come on over to our side? The Vandy DC, who's had a really nice year calling plays for Clark Lee after Clark Lee kind of stepped back into that head coaching role. And he's not a Bros Award semifinalist, or not a Bros Award I think they're finalists right now. I can't remember. There's still like 46 left, but in the way that Tim Beck kind of got that nod. But is that the move that you make if you're Tennessee, if you're Josh Heupel? Because you need to make changes. You very clearly need to make changes. It did not work out this year. And you watch Diego Pavia come in and just dismantle you. And the thing that you don't appreciate about Pavia unless you watch him, these defenses want to kill him. These defenses want to get every possible clean hit on that guy and make sure that he thinks a little bit longer when he gets up. The contact that he creates and what he is willing to put himself through in the middle of the field. And when guys lick their chops and go, oh, this guy ain't sliding. Oh, this guy isn't just running out of bounds. Diego Pavia is willing to put himself in that position. Then he just kind of pops back up. He's like, no big deal. Yeah, I'm good. Maybe every once in a while he'll get up a little bit slower, but you never have to wonder, is this guy going to stay in a football game? He's always going to stay in the football game. And these defenders want to kill him. They really,
so
truly
badly, and more so every play because he never stops talking trash. He makes it.
Yeah,
he
he's
is
talking
the villain. It's so great.
36 touchdowns for a Vandy team that won 10 games for the first time ever. And playoff, probably not going to happen. Don't care. Is he going to win the Heisman Trophy is the question that we're going to be asking. It's the question we're going to be asking for the next 2 weeks because, man, I know I said after the Texas game, I think his Heisman chances are now cooked with this loss. I think it's going to be really difficult for him to be able to kind of overcome some of the statistical things. And then he's put together one of the best 4-game statistical stretches that I think we've ever seen in the SEC. I really think that. And he's, I think, got so many people realizing how special he is for college football. And yes, the family's a lot. His brother's getting arrested afterwards. And I'm not saying you have to embrace all of that to be a fan of Pavia. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to love it every time they show his mom in the crowd and the family going nuts. You can be fatigued of that and also be like, dang, this is remarkable. It is unbelievable to watch in real time. We are seeing something so special. I think he gets to New York, and I think there's going to be a real push for him to win the award.
Yeah, for sure. And I will stop saying this when things change, but as long as he keeps doing this, is what there is to say, which is that it's so shocking to me that last year, he took all the hits. He, has, I think it was third in the SEC in carries. He got hurt down the stretch. He couldn't get the ball down the field. And when you think, what does this look like after like the Bama loss? What does this look like after the Texas loss when the wind should be out of your sails? He goes in and gets better, gets in the lab and becomes like a pocket passer. In addition, a true dual threat quarterback, the highest honor to me. Because like I tell you, I always think that's a little bit of a misnomer. And I think it just, you can't say enough for a guy that every stage people have said, you can't do this. You can't do this. You're not big enough. You're not talented enough. You're not whatever enough to go to a place like Vandy and put them on the map and just really quick to kind of like add to that like last point I made. Vandy is top 20 in America as a university in endowment, and they're up 150% over the last 5 years. If this is a place that can make money from football, the sky's the limit, because a lot of the SEC schools revenue driver is football. So they invest in it. For Vandy, they haven't needed that. They're in Nashville. They have the medical, they have all these donors and stuff. So if you can do what Clark Lee has done and say, we're getting 5 stars in here, we're building something, we don't want our coaches to leave. This might not be a place you could poach coaches from anymore, especially with an alum, 2 alums in Clark Lee and Barton Simmons. They were roommates running the program. They make it fun to play there.
You know what's going to be wild? In the midst of all this, Marty Smith's going to go from 36 hours of Lane Kiffin coverage in Oxford to interviewing the Pavia family in New York, probably. Marty's going to have a ton of stuff in between then. I know that. But can you picture the Pavia family on live TV? I don't think the brothers are getting live TV treatment. They need like a dumb button or something like that. That'll be a sight to see, needless to say. All right, Georgia Tech. If you were a Georgia fan, did you hate this win? A little bit. A little bit. Look, we don't take rivalry wins for granted, but think about the elements here. First of all, Georgia Tech taking the $8 million payday instead of playing at Bobby Dodd. Okay, it made you feel uncomfortable, probably. All that's wrong with college football is Georgia Tech playing this game at Mercedes-Benz. I get it from that standpoint. It didn't make you feel particularly good, even if you're on the Georgia side. You watch Gunnar Stockton do virtually nothing in the passing game in this one for the majority of the game. You watch your ground game take a significant step back after the Drew Bobo injury, which that's not something that's very closely going to be watched for the SEC championship and
Who
what all that
would have
means.
thought, Cotter, that the Bobos would make this much of a positive impact on Georgia? Or even that. Remember who got hurt last year at Bobo comes in? It's like, we got Bobo. Like, da da da. Oh no, this is like, hate to say, like, it's the coach's kid, but how many coaches' kids have been this
He's been
valuable
great.
to their team? He's a
Yeah.
good. You see what happens when he goes out, and so it's funny to think when Carson Beck was on your team, Bobo is kind of a cloud. He's stuck in his ways. His son's on the team. He's a Depo baby. You look now, it's like we can't run the ball without his son.
Some are saying Drew is the most valuable Bobo after that game.
MVP.
Yes. Like, think of all those elements. And you had to sweat out a Haynes King Hail Mary. You didn't watch your team score a touchdown in the second half. And as a result of winning this game and A&M losing, well, I shouldn't say as a result of winning this game. That was independent. But basically as a result of A&M losing to Texas, you now have this SEC championship to play in. And you thought you were going to be able to just be idle at 11-1 and potentially get a first round bye. And instead, you have to play in this game now. It's against Bama. You're going to be reminded of all of the warts of playing against Bama. That's going to be very well documented. It's okay, Georgia fans, if winning this game the way that you did made you a little bit sick to your stomach. And again, it's not that this win clinched a spot in the SEC championship. I get that. But if this weekend itself, maybe that's the better way to phrase it. If this weekend, Georgia, who is poised to be the ultimate winners of this and just kind of lurk and just be that team that is benefiting from all of the chaos around them potentially, is now going like, that didn't go the way that we hoped.
There was
It's
team
okay
after
to admit
team
that.
where you told me this is copium. We're like, everybody wants to play for an SEC championship game. And now we're looking at Marcel Reed getting banged up, getting to spend a week off. Now we're looking at this going, do you want to play Bama again right before you run? It's a different conversation. The teams that win or lose without it are going to shape the narrative like they always do. And for a while, it's going to be in vogue to say, we'd rather not play it. Oh, we'd rather lose, whatever. But I think if you're Georgia, you'll take a trip to Atlanta back to back, I guess.
Yeah, 8 of 9 years in which you're playing in a conference championship game. And if you need some perspective of, hey, just appreciate what it means to beat a rival, to beat Georgia Tech, to have this winning streak against them. Nebraska got waxed by Iowa. By the way, lock of the week. We're back to 500 in that. So unless Nebraska beats a ranked team in a bowl game, they will go into the 2026 season searching for their first AP Top 25 win since September of 2016, which is also Kirby Smart's first month on the job at Georgia. Since Kirby got to Georgia, 2016 was his first season. He now has 33 wins against AP Top 25 teams. Friday's win passed Nick Saban for the most in that 10-year stretch. I realize Nick Saban's been out the last 2 years, but nonetheless, 11-1, going to yet another SEC championship, feeling like at the very, very worst, we're going to be in a favorable first round playoff matchup wherein you're having somebody come into Athens. That is a great place to be. And again, like, you're getting to a conference championship game while A&M desperate to get to a conference title game and just can't for whatever reason. So all that perspective is probably worth mentioning. And if I'm looking for a spin zone here, I think Georgia kept the passing game pretty simple in this one. A lot of design rollouts for Gunnar Stockton. He was kind of holding it in some of those spots instead of taking risks, keeping out of harm's way. It was more of a game manager type game. A few deep shots. Love the one that he ripped deep down the middle of the field to Zachariah Branch, though. They weren't emptying their bag of tricks for the playoff. If you're a Georgia fan, you're just kind of telling yourself that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, initially you hit on the run game. I would say Gunnar Stockton in the passing game is the one that kind of looked a little bit shaky to me in this one. And I think
For
that
sure.
is a little bit being in your own head. Like, I don't think Georgia Tech is a world beating defense. We saw this against Pitt, a couple weeks ago. Like, it's not that you're playing, like Auburn, where they're a really proud defense, but they have other stuff going on. It's like, no, you probably left some points on the board, but I'll say it like this. This is just Georgia's brand. We've talked about it. This is now the second time, Connor, I have been saying the exact same thing that's happened. I've gone, wow, Georgia's the most confusing good defense I've ever watched. They can kind of get gassed here and there. They can't really but then when you need it, and
They
then
get it.
as I say it, a pick happens. That happened against Texas. I was telling Perry, I was telling my stepdad this. That insane Lewis Ellis Robinson pick was just like, this is Georgia. It's just you feel it coming where it goes, they're starting to drive down the field. They're starting to cut this, to like a winnable game. Like, uh-oh. And then exactly at that tipping point where things are supposed to go bad. Oh, we kick an onside kick. Game over. Oh, we get a pick. Game over. And so I'm not going to do the spin zone thing and say battle tested because you really should have had more points against Georgia Tech. Really, you should have had more yards against Georgia Tech. I think you got the
Agreed.
maximum amount of points you probably could have gotten for the amount of yards you got. So that being said, I think there are some things that maybe they were looking ahead. Maybe they were thinking we don't need to show our whole playbook here. Maybe, the offensive line and stuff. But I think you can't play like this against a good team. But the good news is Georgia Tech isn't really a good team at this point. So they did what they needed to do to escape Atlanta. Georgia fans, let me know. Would you rather have played this game at Bobby Dodd? You kind of get a warm up for Atlanta, but to your point, they could end up playing 3 games in the state of Georgia, right? Where they go Mercedes-Benz, Athens. Could be pretty interesting. So, yeah, I think your worst case right now is hosting a home game. So that's what you guys have been wanting this whole time.
Mercedes-Benz potentially in semi too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. Georgia going to another SEC championship. All right, Clemson, South Carolina. Let's whip through these last few games with like just a few minutes apiece on them because these two teams are going nowhere. Although Clemson would like to tell you that it is. Clemson finally beat an SEC team. South Carolina, that's a nice thing to say about you, calling you an SEC team. Congratulations. Easy to forget that at times with the mistakes that they make. Just self-combust so many times. 4 turnovers, the red zone pick. Yes, it should have been ruled a drop. No idea how that was ruled an interception. But still, you had Lenore Sellers putting the ball in harm's way with an over-the-top safety, something that he did far too often in this game. Even the touchdown pass to Jacobs, which I don't know what the Clemson secondary was doing on that play. Remarkable play by Jacobs to catch this in double coverage and then, have the catch and run afterwards. But too many mistakes in that area. And maybe that's a difficult thing to say with how much Sellers had to do in this one. But the pick 6 where you're throwing from your own end zone and you're kind of banking on Nick Harbor to be able to carve out some space and you just didn't necessarily put that ball where it needed to be. And that was all she wrote, the pick 6 right there, instead of having a potential go-ahead drive like you did in this game last year. Fitting in a lot of ways. Very, very fitting. A winnable game and just too many missed opportunities. This game was just kind of a bummer. And South Carolina's season has been a bummer. 4-8. You beat Virginia Tech and Kentucky. Cool. Being low on South Carolina coming into the year was predicting them to go 7-5. And now I think we have to ask this question, Will. After this game, after losing to Clemson at home, is this back to must-champ levels of bad? Are the vibes similar? Because it kind of feels like it.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, because the thing about Muschamp is that I feel like when I see Shane Beamer, I see a guy that has a want to get it right. I think he's a guy that could be humble. Yeah, he could be a little bit brash, but I think that he has been able to look internally and retool some things. Whereas I think what did Muschamp in is arrogance. I don't think just because Beamer's a little bit goofy, I don't think he's arrogant.
No, he's not.
You know what? I'll ask you this question because it's kind of a follow up to it. We're not going to talk. Do you have something to say on that? Sorry.
Well, the South Carolina OC hire that many have been talking about, there's maybe some arrogance there. But I wouldn't. That wouldn't be the first adjective that I would think of for Shane Beamer.
Yeah, and I think he's been an adapter to that guy. I think he's going to adapt again. We'll see what Sellers' future holds. He was kind of non-committal on that. He said he's been kind of consulted over the offensive coordinator stuff. Here's the question. This is all I have on South Carolina today. If Shane Beamer became available in this cycle after this season, where would you place him?
It's a good question. Are you saying right now, vacancy?
Like, let's say he just goes, you know what, guys, I'm out. Not fired, because I do think fired is a little bit different. If he just goes, I'm out, and like on a week ago or whatever, you knew he was out and he could be part of all these searches, do you think he could get back to a place like an Auburn?
He would be, no. I think he'd be like the bottom end of the tier 2 candidates. He'd be like considered right up there with the group of 5 hires that have been made with maybe some different energy. And maybe that's not fair because I do think he cleaned up a lot of the Muschamp mess that was left. And maybe it's unfair to say vibes are similar because the Muschamp quarterback stuff that was just always going to loom over the program. They were never going to put their quarterback in the right spot, whether it was evaluation, whether it was scheme, whatever it was. You just knew that Muschamp wasn't going to be the guy to figure it out. And so maybe that's different. And Beamer is now in the spot where he likes to be doubted. And he doesn't like to have these preseason expectations. And so you can kind of spin it in that sort of way. But it's so difficult to answer that question because with him, it's a lot about alignment. And he had that at South Carolina. Like we talked about them keeping their premier players. That's a sign that you had alignment. But what does it look like now? You have to nail this OC hire. It will define the rest of his time. And maybe Joe Moorhead is the guy you should hire as his OC.
This guy, man, I'm gonna find out you're with CAA or whatever. Maybe like
No,
Moorhead.
no.
Maybe there's an agency that just has one client. It's Joe Moorhead, and you're the other client.
Joe's son is now playing. His son Donovan, I think, is going to be going to Jacksonville State. So he's going to be like. I think he wanted to do. It wouldn't surprise me if Joe was on the move, and like ready to move on from Akron and wanted to have his kids have like a stable high school experience. Kind of what I talked about with Mike Elko and why he stayed as a DC at Texas A&M for all those years, and then why it made sense in the coaching cycle of, hey, now as my kids are off to college, I feel a little. I've been the guy that's always on the move. I kind of want this stability. Want to do this for 3-4 years. Maybe Joe Moorhead, OC at South Carolina, could be the answer. Good numbers as an OC. A little bit tougher as a head coach.
Right.
I admit that.
I like that you're the Windhorst of Joe Moorhead. Anyway, that being said, would you rather the feeling of hopelessness and arrogance with Muschamp, or would you rather we almost had it? Because that's the thing that we've liked so much about Shane Beamer.
Good question, Will.
Is that he's been in these games. And even this year, he was very much should have won the Bama game, very much should have won the A&M game. Muschamp wasn't there. Yeah, he beat Georgia with Fromm. Cool. They kind of beat themselves. Like, his teams for like basically 2 independent halves of football were like world beaters, and then the air just came out of the sails. And you could say some of that's Mike Shula, then he got fired. Some of it's not having your offensive coordinator and kind of having the guy figure it out on the spot. But his teams at least showed they were locked in. At least showed they're playing for him hard. At least showed that some of the stuff, at least on the defensive side of the ball, where you really liked him, where they're physical, some of the Beamer ball stuff. And again, I know you missed field goals against Alabama, whatever. But that being said, I do think that there's enough hopium here where you go, if we could have just won one of those games, that would have just made us feel like we had something. So I don't think the book's been written. I think you just got to close out a game or two in a bad year, and you're different.
Give me Beamer over Muschamp. Who would I trust in this situation right now to rebuild it? I trust Beamer over Muschamp. Simple as that. By the way, Dabo did it again. 4th win in a row to close the regular season. Maybe he's going to win 5 in a row by getting to a bowl game victory, 8-5. He'll have everyone convinced by this time, or by 6-7 months from now, that Clemson's going to be competing for a national championship. So good for him. All right, Kentucky, Louisville. This is what the end looks like, Will. Coin flip game. At least that's what the spread suggested with your reeling rival, bowl berth to play for. Your rival has a true freshman walk-on starting at running back, and you get waxed in every possible way. 41-0. At one point in the middle of the third quarter, I had to look up if it was Kentucky's first time crossing midfield. That's how bad it was. And for what it's worth, it wasn't. They had missed a 52-yard field goal attempt earlier that I forgot about because I was taking Claire to the zoo. Perfect zoo weather. It was Saturday morning, Central Florida. Otters were just kind of on one, doing all the twisting underwater that you just love. And when they're playful, like all love that otters. Stuff.
So pro otter, dude.
The giraffe and the rhino were both out. Like, it wasn't too hot for them. Where they're just kind of tucked away in the corner. I'm procrastinating because I don't want to talk about this football game. But this was so bad because after that missed field goal that Kentucky had, here were the next drives. 3 plays for 4 yards, 4 plays for -6 yards, 3 plays for -2 yards, 3 plays for 8 yards, 4 plays for 9 yards. That is 17 plays on offense and 13 yards. They had 147 yards of offense in this game. And then when they finally crossed midfield, when I realized, hey, is this Kentucky's first time crossing midfield? Cutter Boley just threw a pick on a really nice play by the Louisville DB. This game made me wish I had stayed at the zoo. It did. It was so bad. Never earned multi-view audio. Was never going to. The most entertaining part of this game was actually when Louisville had like a 4th and 1 play action, long touchdown to the tight end. And who does the tight end for Louisville dap up on the sideline? Vince Marrow. The Stoops right-hand man, who used to be Kentucky's tight ends coach, who also was tweeting, "Hello, Nick Roush." Shout out Roush. With 6 minutes left of this game, just the ultimate troll. Horrible. Horrible in every possible way. And if you're still defending Mark Stoops, you probably share DNA and maybe not even that.
Yeah, I mean, again, dude, there's just nothing to say about this. Anything I would say would be mean, and you guys already know it. It stinks. It's a tough place to be. This is kind of the one team that you could feel like Mark Stoops had an edge against, and no longer after having a little bit of opium throughout the back part of the year, where we play really well against Florida. You play well, in some of these games, but it all just comes apart, and you see why this could be so frustrating for Kentucky.
Lane Kiffin not coaching Ole Miss in the playoff. Pete Golding, indeed, interim coach.
Who would have
Multiple
thought?
reports. How about Pete Golding, man? How about it?
Oh no, I
Anyway,
guess we got to keep Blake Baker. Hate that. Anyway,
we'll have more of an update if this is indeed we'll circle back if there's a move to be made in the Bluegrass State. Anyway, Mizzou, Arkansas. You don't need the art of the forward pass if you have Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts and Bo Prabula, who was really good with his legs, but completed 4 passes in this one, and Mizzou still wins this by 2 touchdowns. Ahmad Hardy had a very Ahmad Hardy game with just one of the top runs you'll see in college football this year. Just 350-pound dude draped on him, and it did not matter. Still squirted through for a 53-yard touchdown. I predicted 25 for 175 for Hardy in a Mizzou win. He had 27 for 157. My bad. Totally off on that one. 1,560 rushing yards for that dude. He's 140 in a bowl game away from joining the very elusive 1,700-yard rushing club in the SEC. And with the news that Drink, also another coach that signed an extension, he's back on a deal that's averaging $10.7 million. Ahmad Hardy, going to run it back. How about that?
Need a lot of ice.
Good news for Mizzou.
That's a season that it's so frustrating if you're Mizzou, because it literally is. The good news, you don't lose your head coach. The bad news, you don't lose your head coach, right? Where it's like, this is such a special. I mean, it's shades of honestly Taylor Green, where it goes, you have this special player that you just can't line things up to show what he could be. And Hardy, I think, has certainly had a better season than Green because he hadn't had the turnovers. But it's like, this is going to go so. It's going to be kind of like similar to like Anthony Booby, like Dixon with Mississippi State, where like the year that Mark Ingram won the Heisman, I believe he had more rushing yards, and it was just like, how did this guy's more carries? Like, it wasn't as impressive as many touchdowns, but it's like, this is just going to be one of these all-time great seasons in the SEC where we just go, and what was up with that team? We look back at like 6-7 years, and it's a tragedy because your quarterback gets hurt, he comes back, he's not healthy, but I think you can say your team has an identity. The defense has been good. They are physical. They have a floor to them, unless you're playing A&M. And I think, if you're Mizzou, from where you came from, you're at least not going to get embarrassed. And that's what we were worried about through a couple of years of Drink. So it's good. But Hardy's that man.
He's going to be the best returning player in the SEC if he comes back to Mizzou. That maybe there will be arguments with certain. You could probably find a couple of corners in the SEC that maybe you can make the case for people. It depends. But even if you're saying, oh well, what about Cam Coleman? Where if Cam Coleman goes to an ideal situation, I think Ahmad Hardy is the most proven player. I think he's the most proven player.
Like SEC Player of the Year odds type, where it's like, yeah, like Cam Coleman. Hey, probably before yesterday we would have felt a little bit differently in that big moment. But hey, Cam Coleman might be as good or better at receiver, but being a running back in that system, the whole brunt of the offense is on your shoulders. So as an impactful player, that's a guy that's going to make a big difference.
Only now with this new contract that Drink signed, only 5 coaches in the sport made more than the $10.75 million that he set to make. Only 5 coaches this year. Kirby, Day, Riley, Dabo, Sark. That's going to change with the new contracts, all these extensions. The market this year is so unbelievably inflated. I'm going to put playoff expectations on Mizzou right now. I'm going to do it for next year. With Drink coming back, if you're able to retain some of these young pieces on defense too, and you hit on a couple of these guys in the portal, in theory, you have Bo Prabula coming back fully healthy, another year in the offense. If you retain Kirby Moore as well, TBD on that.
That's the guy you got to pay. Honestly, as frustrating as he's been this year, but like in terms of like all these coaching staffs are getting made, we don't know if Lane Kiffin's going to call him. I don't think he will. You know what I'm saying? But just everything is different, so we don't know everybody's getting calls right now. Quick update, Connor. Funniest coaching update I can give you. Tim Beck has been fired at Coastal Carolina.
Tim Beck, man. Not the Tim Beck who is the Vanderbilt offensive coordinator. the longtime coach of the Gorillas. Tim Beck, one of the sweetest men you'll ever meet, but just a baffling college football resume that I will spend no shortage of time studying for the rest of my life. I mean, really, I cannot figure it out.
That's
Just
how
the
you know
sweetest
the
man.
cycle is crazy. Even that Tim Beck can't keep a job. All right, that guy, when you're bailing on him, he can survive anything. Anyway, I say that to say, as frustrating as it could be, this is still the same Kirby Moore that brought your team to these 10-win seasons. It's still the one that had success under Brady Cook. It's still the one that beat Ohio State. I think that your best move is to make sure he's happy and good and not, out here looking at these new like hot job offerings for either OC or head
Interviewed
coach.
at Arkansas,
Or head coach
and
in the
was pretty
American,
open about that.
or,
Yeah,
or head coach in the American,
true.
these jobs that have just opened. So I would say, like, wherever you're at, you just paid your head coach. You need to make that guy, because just the thought of a better version of this, and I talked about this a couple episodes ago, where you go, hey, if and when he stays, your point, there's a lot of younger guys. There's a lot of guys from the state. There's a lot of recruits coming up that could really do some impactful things here. And this technically should have been a rebuilding year for Mizzou. And again, early, they looked pretty solid. I mean, really, it was just kind of like the Kansas win, and playing it kind of respectable against Alabama. But that being said, this should be a floor season for Drink based on what he's done recently. All you can look at the last couple of years and say, hey, we expect 9-10 wins against this style schedule. I don't have their schedule off the top of my head, obviously, but that's going to be a difference next year. But that being said, like, it could certainly be worse. And I think that this team has nowhere to go but up with the pieces they have on the roster.
Kirby Moore to Tulane. Keep that one in mind. Would be interesting, especially with his brother already being in New Orleans. Just saying. All right. Florida State, Florida. One note. Jaden Baugh. That's it. That's all I got. That was this game. Jaden Baugh.
We said
Jaden Baugh rules.
About a quarter into the season, we were right. Defense rests.
38 times, 266 rushing yards. Second best game ever by a Florida running back. Some guy named Emmitt Smith, still number 1 on that list, number 3 on that list too. Jaden Baugh. If you're Jon Sumrall, you're doing the thing where you kind of look around and you're like, we got to keep this guy. We got to keep this guy. Jaden Baugh will be in that conversation of the best returning players in the SEC. He is that dude. Get him in the right offensive scheme with a coach who actually recognizes from the jump that he needs to be fed in the way that, say what you want about Billy Gonzalez, he fed Jaden Baugh the football, and he realized Florida State did not want Jaden Baugh to be fed the football. How bad is Florida State? Is there a program right now that feels worse about where they are currently at? Kentucky and Florida State are in a pillow fight for who can feel worse right now.
FSU is so uniquely bad because it was just 2 years ago that they really probably should have been. And we talked about this ad nauseum, but like, they were based on resume with Jordan Travis, the top 4 team in America, and they had these impressive wins. They won their conference, like things that you was just, okay, we got our head coach, we're set. It was a young coach that you thought he's going to be here forever, and now it's like this giant poison pill contract, and they're finding a way to lose games. That, dude, if you watched the NC State game the other day, that was one of the funniest. It was like I couldn't stop. I was on the floor laughing watching them lose to NC State, and it's mind blowing,
baffling. Yeah, they find ways to lose in the most baffling of ways. But yeah, they don't get to reset because when you got $58 million that you still have a head coach, that's going to hang over you. Anyway, all right, college football playoff top 12. Let's close with this. BYU number 12, Miami 11, jumping yet again. Alabama at 10, Notre Dame at 9, Oklahoma at 8, Ole Miss at 7, Texas A&M at 6. That'll be interesting. Very, very interesting to see how far A&M falls. Oregon at 5, Texas Tech at 4, Georgia at 3, Indiana at 2, Ohio State at 1. Anything stand out?
Well, you got to be prepared for the committee to give a theoretical conference title to Notre Dame. So they're probably in contention for the 1 seed, given how strong their resume has been.
Now it's finally time to look at them side by side with Miami. Now it's finally time.
You know what's the good question, Connor? How are they going to view that A&M loss in context of Notre Dame? They have one last chance to stop hyping Notre Dame like this because there's no conference championship to be played. And maybe that's what they're doing is they're pre-rating Notre Dame to where when the conference championship games happen, some teams could jump them. But that's Notre Dame's always been my issue here. But yeah, I mean, none of this top. I talked about it with Ole Miss, where I said they're being pre-set up to get dropped to the rankings. That's what's going to happen, with Pete Golding and that staff. And if FSU could get, cooked by the committee the way that they did, unfortunately, that's the one precedent I think they will set is saying, we don't want to watch your team. You're going to fall down.
Tuesday is going to be fascinating. It'll be really interesting.
Watch that one. That's not an email.
Watch that one.
This is the one you got to watch.
Yes, this is the one that you actually have to watch because they do like to lock in things before conference championship weekend and not necessarily punish those teams for playing in conference championship games. So that's going to be very, very important. Well, that's a pod. That was 100. We got 100 minutes out of this. 100 minutes out of this. Holy cow.
I don't think we
There
wasted
was
a lot
so
of
much to
time.
get to.
This was a great best
We
hits
didn't.
from us. We got some Tim Beck, we got some Joe Moorhead, we got some. I
Good
mean,
Lord.
if you like the pod, you're in for a treat because we did coaching, we previewed a bunch of
Yes.
bad teams, we talked about your future. So that's rivalry week, folks. This is the last week of the regular season, Connor.
Love it. Absolutely love
I
it.
don't. I'm sad.
Like I said, we'll have more of the coaching hires midweek, but still so much to talk about. Still a lot of football left to be played. Can't wait for conference championship weekend and everything that's going to come with that. Please, please, please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Chris Ward. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.